The wife of a coal importer, Mrs. Patterson, of the Hawthorn Ladies' Benevolent Society in Melbourne, was well known for her kindly acts of charity. So it was only natural that in June 1892 she was approached by a grieving widow. The poor woman was weeping bitterly in her anguish. She stood there looking poverty-stricken, in cheap clothing, and explained between sobs to Mrs. Patterson that her life was one of poverty and distress. Life was hard, and she had had very little to eat for some time. Yet now even greater travail had fallen upon her. Her husband had died, and she had no money for a proper funeral. Moved by the unfortunate woman's plight, Mrs. Patterson promised that she would see if there was anything she could do. The alms-seeker praised the other woman with blessings for her vow. With no time wasted, Mrs. Patterson and another charitably inclined lady of the society visited an address in Hawthorn with the indigent widow. It was a small, modest cottage, and upon entering they discovered that it was barely furnished at all. And what there was old, worn, and cheap. The cottage was also somewhat dirty. The suffering widow explained that she had lacked the vitality to do housework as she was so hungry. There was, she said, no food at all in the house. Also in the cottage was another woman who seemed very worn down by life. This woman was deep in mourning, crying piteously, and blubbed out that the man who had died was her brother. The visitors were ushered into a room where the deceased lay on a stretcher in one corner, covered by an inexpensive burial shroud. Evening was darkening, and the room was gloomy. The widow went to her husband's body and lifted the shroud. "Look at his dead face," she moaned. The body of a well-built man, younger than middle age, was laid out, his face a pallid white hue. With some trepidation, the two ladies took in the sight and quickly averted their gaze. Moved by their experience, the pair placed an ample sum of money into the widow's hands to pay for a decent burial for the man. They additionally pledged that they would have necessities and even a few luxuries provided to the widow and her sister-in-law by a local store. Then they departed, probably somewhat anxious to leave the hovel and its dismal atmosphere. It only took a few minutes, though, for Mrs. Patterson's friend to realise that she had put down a parasol she had been carrying. She recalled she left it in the room where they saw the dead man, so she hurried back to retrieve it. Upon entering the room, she was startled to see that the ashen-faced corpse had revived and was sitting up on the bed counting the banknotes that had been gifted for his burial fees. Agog at the swindle, the lady rushed away to inform Mrs. Patterson what had occurred. By the time the law came calling, the trio of confidence tricksters had fled. Evidence left behind showed that the ghastly pallor of the man's face had been achieved with a painting of a chalk-based whitewash. It appears the swindlers got clean away, and who knows how many times the corpse had died before, and how many times again.